I'll just let them kind of introduce themselves and talk a little bit about what they write.
All right, I'm Dave Ferraro. I write young adults in a variety of different genres, mostly fantasy, some contemporary, some horror, and my day job happens to be working at Racine.
He is one of my managers, so you've probably seen him before. Sarah.
Oh, yeah, my name is Sarah. I'm from LaPorte, Indiana. I write young adult science fantasy, so that's a lot of fun. It's kind of a blending of the fantasy and science fiction genres, so I really enjoy that. And my first book came out last year. It's first in a series, so I'm really excited to kick it off, and hopefully I'll be back later with more books.
We like the idea.
Yes.
I'm Mike Reid, and I write science fiction and military thrillers. Probably heading more into the science fiction world. And yeah, so I have 4 books here, and Tim really likes one of them.
At least one of them. The exciting thing too with Michael is that yeah, it's been fun because when I first came to the store, I've been here for about 2.5 years. He came in right away, introduced himself. We were able to get his books into the store, and we've been able to kind of work with him. So we actually have his first ever hardcover that's been published here today, which is exciting for us. We like, again, supporting the local authors, but it's really good to see. It's like, you know, kid gone turned good type of thing. So it's good. It's good stuff. And Tim.
I'm Tim Hennessy. I edited the Milwaukee Noir Anthology. I write for Publishers Weekly, doing reviews, and I've also had my fiction in Tough Magazine, crime fiction, and also Mystery Tribune. And I also am a bookseller at Half Price Books in Brookfield.
We can't get away from books. Real good. Well, thanks again for taking the time. So the first question I wanted to pose to everyone, and I guess if you want to just kind of fight for who goes first. So what is your writing background? What type of, what got you into the genre that you're writing? What's your mainstay? You go first.
Well, I've always known that I wanted to be a writer, and I was lucky enough to have been encouraged by my teachers growing up to continue writing. So I did go to college for it. I got a bachelor's degree in English and creative writing, but I really started writing in middle school and I haven't stopped since.
I can go next, I guess.
Nice.
I never knew I wanted to be a writer as a kid. I was going to be a landscape architect, and not a landscape architect, but I went to school for it. So I started writing probably about middle school. So I was writing fiction. I was writing poetry when I was younger, and I wrote my first full novel in high school. And then this one I started when I was in college. I went down to Purdue University, so that's kind of how I got started with writing, and now that's all I want to do, so it worked out.
This has nothing to do with my career.
Awesome. I like it.
No, it's kind of a release. I like creating, and this was an avenue that allowed me to do that. And it's nice when stories come to mind and you can develop them. So yeah, it started a handful of years for me, and the process just keeps accelerating. I always thought I'd run out of material and then I'd be done, but now I don't have writer's block, I have writer's roadblock. So there's too many stories, so I can't figure out what which one I want to tell.
Awesome.
So it's
a good
nice
problem to have.
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
And Tim.
I was a horrific student. I was a terrible writer. One of my teachers came to the last event, was very proud to see that I got it improved. I was a horrific student. I struggled at reading, horrendous writer, horrendous speller. I just love stories. I come from a family, everybody would tell great stories, so that was always a big draw to me. And just being able to put that together was the struggle that I went through grade school and high school and junior high, and in college I kind of hit a stride more so because I've always loved movies too. So I would kind of combine those, and when I got out of school I kept writing, and I just generally got better the more I kept doing it. And storytelling has always been the thing that I've always been drawn to, so I just kind of stuck with it, because that was where my mind would always go in. And I've always had jobs where, thankfully, carrying a notebook and writing down, jotting down notes has never been a problem. So thankfully that's kind of just led me to kind of slowly keep working on everything. And I never imagined I would have a book at all or be in this position, but I was lucky enough to, in high school, I started working for the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and started reviewing movies. So I found a way to basically get paid to do something I liked. And that was one of the things that kind of unlocked it for me, was I get paid, to see the movie and write and have enough money for popcorn. So it was kind of a gradual process, and I had other kind of journalism-related jobs doing some freelance stuff, and one of them was for writing for a crime magazine, where I got to meet a lot of crime writers and get to always ask them any of my ridiculous questions, and really through having that kind of community was one of the things that helped me get in a position to be able to do this book.
See, so all different walks of life. It's good times. All right, so some fun questions here. What are some of your favorite authors or genres? What do you enjoy reading?
I'll go first. Yeah.
There we go.
Neil Gaiman changed my life, and then I started reading Bradbury, and then there was a whole another life-changing thing. Del Toro, Guillermo del Toro, has but then I think he was involved with my favorite movie, Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So I really like him. Those three guys are probably the most familiar.
Cool.
James S.A. Corey, I love reading Expanse books right now.
It's a great series. Just so.
Sarah J. Maas, she writes young adult fantasy. I think probably half of the people who work here read her books.
And if you shop here regularly, we've probably recommended it a couple times.
And I grew up with Christopher Pike and L.J. Smith, so those are definitely big influences on my reading. Cool. Lots of fantasy writers.
Building on that, I can go next. So I've always enjoyed reading the science fiction and fantasy genre that I now write in. But from a young age, J.K. Rowling with her extensive world building, I mean, that was really fun to, as I got older, kind of examine how she built this huge world and try to apply that to my own writing. DJ McHale as well, and then more recently, authors like Alexandra Bracken is really big. I had the opportunity to meet her a little while ago, and that was really exciting. And then Juliana Baggett, Cinda Williams-Chuma, those types of authors, they're all in the fantasy realm, so I'm pretty at home there.
Raymond Carver, big fan, his birthday. Elmore Leonard, he kind of always combined crime and also his characters. It was always funny. David Sedaris was huge. And Megan Abbott. And Mary Miller, she just has a book next to come out this week. She's fantastic. There's a lot of writers. One of the great things about working in a bookstore is every day you don't know what new favorite author you're gonna find in the shelf, and a lot of times you're shelving and you start reading something and you don't know when that book, what you're picking up could be your next favorite thing.
It happens a lot. Like, I know Dave can attest, and I'm sure Tim you can, but it's really hard working here. Because you find it's like a new one of the week, and then we often have just like conversations about what we're reading and what we really enjoy at the moment, and then we get everyone else's suggestions, so now we have to read those. It's really tough, so that's why I've only read one of yours. So what inspires you to write?
Well, I will say that growing up, I read a lot of young adult books, and I would kind of look at the covers of the books and the descriptions and kind of imagine what the book would be like. And oftentimes it wouldn't match what I was kind of thinking in my head, so I kind of wrote those stories that I was kind of thinking that they would be. And since then I've just kind of snowballed with that.
That's really fun because I kind of do the same thing, not just with backs of books, but also like TV shows when I was younger, and I would kind of go through these episodes in my head of, well, what if they did this instead? And then as far as being inspired to write, I don't know, just I get bored and these daydreams just kind of happen, and I kind of have to get them out of my head. So that's a big part of the writing. And then what's fun is going back, I can see a lot of my own life experiences that I sort of subconsciously sewed into my stories. Even things like, you know, when I was going off to college and I was leaving home for the first time and I was really nervous about that, looking at my writing at that time and seeing this character going off on a big quest and kind of mirroring my issues but in a fantasy realm. So it's kind of neat how that plays into each other.
I never ever was going to publish a book, ever. And I was writing to just kind of pass some time. Like I had an idea. I watched a movie called Spy Games and was like, I think I could write something like that. So I started, and I just kept quitting because I felt like I was wasting my life. And then one day a patient of mine was like, let me read what you're writing, and I don't know how he convinced me to. But I let him, and he was like, you should finish that. And so I did, and then I published it, and then I felt inspired to write another one, and then another one. And then, like you were saying, like you get an idea in your head, and like it never leaves me alone until like I can get to the end of what I think the story would be, and then like I can breathe and then write it. Yeah.
It would be a lot of times like I'll just have I'll kind of keep a journal of observations. You know, like during my day, when you work in retail, you see a lot of odd things. You have a lot of really strange conversations, and when you work in a used bookstore, you never know what you're going to find in somebody's buy. We've had anything from used laundry to live ammunition to dead animals. So, and sometimes you find, like we found the other day, a letter from this guy to his girlfriend's father, and it's clear the father hates him. So it's stuff like that. You find these really odd nuggets, and I kind of just file it away, and I read the newspaper a lot, just mostly for ideas, and you always at the end of a story when something has happened, or at least a nugget of something. So a lot of times I have these pieces, and I try to figure out how to put them together. And between that and I have more than enough colorful people that I'm around in my family and my friends, that there's always somebody who says something that you just think like, oh man, that could fit in a story somehow. I used to be a cable guy, and every day, my whole day from the time I woke up to the time I finally got to go home was nothing but conflict. And you're in everybody's houses. That was one of the things that made this book something that I always had my eye towards, is because when I had started working in that job, they started producing these books. And that was quite a while ago, but I would drive around Milwaukee and a lot of other places in Wisconsin, and the locations were always so phenomenal, and you see places and get into things you would never have access to otherwise. But I always thought it would be cool if we could do one in Milwaukee. Just never thought I would actually be editing it.
Sarah, something that you said was really interesting about, what was it? I was going to say Stephen King said this very similar thing. I don't know if anyone's read On Writing.
Yeah.
This is my one plug. I promise I won't do merchandise plugs. But if you are somebody that's interested in writing and you haven't read it, you really should. Because it's just a phenomenal book about the writing process. It's kind of a part memoir, part treatise on the craft. But one of the things that he said was that his characters very much became real to him, and that through his writing, that's how he dealt with a number of his different things that he's gone through. So a lot of people know he was in a horrendous accident, and the only way that he was able to deal with that on an emotional level was to write it into one of his really popular series, the Dark Tower series. So I think it's really interesting that you say the same thing, that you find a reflection of your personal life in your writing, because I think that a lot of authors do the same thing. And then Michael, I know that you do a lot of research. You've done different research. I just read a couple blurbs about what you did for Sins of the Father and Dead of Fear. So that's really interesting too, being able to go in and get a good idea of true to life. How often do you have to feel that you have to do that to make your writing real?
Me?
Yeah.
All the time. Because I think if you're not doing that, you're not being smart about it. Because somebody's going to know. Somebody's going to know it more than you do. So you might as well go to the source and figure out the right way to say it or write it or what should be there.
Cool.
And because otherwise you're going to get some bad feedback.
Somebody's going to be mad.
Plus it's fun to know. It's fun to learn new things. Because then you never know where it's going to take you either. You might learn something new, and then now you have a whole other story, or it completely changes directions. Like when I went to interview the guy for the first time with that book, I had an idea in my head. And the first question he asked me was, how real do you want this book to be? How close to reality, or how, or far?
Yeah.
And I said, I want it to be so close to reality that people Google stuff because they're not sure if it's real or not. And he goes, okay, then we need to stop talking about what we're talking about. So it changes things, right? So,
Cool.
yeah.
One of my favorite authors growing up was Michael Crichton. I just love the genre that he created, and he is my author when I was growing up, and he did tons of research. He had a medical background, but the like cutting edge techno thriller type of genre wouldn't have been the same without him and the amount of research that he put into it. We wouldn't have Jurassic Park. I mean, some huge culture changing things all through that process of interviewing and learning about different things. So I thought that was really cool.
No, Jurassic Park, I don't think people like it was so
bleeding
far
edge.
ahead of
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. And then editing a book. So maybe you can just explain real quick what's kind of the difference between writing and editing a book?
Well, it's exercising very different muscles. And at the time when I started this, I was the one with the least amount of credits and the least amount of experience doing this. So it was kind of a challenging ask because there are a lot of people that had quite a bit of experience. So it was trying to figure out how to work with them. The way that we were different than other anthologies, a lot of anthologies, you might have an open call for some stories and you kind of wade through things and you kind of decide what are the best ones. It was an invitation, so I was sending emails to people who I was an absolute stranger to, and Googling me didn't really help them that much. They would look at it and they think, I have no idea who this. They would think, I heard later that everybody kept thinking it was a scam.
Awesome.
And which was real fun. So one of the things that the contributors did was they had to, not all of them have a background actually writing crime fiction. A lot of them write other things. There's people who write more literary fiction, there's poets, there's journalists. So I was asking them to do something outside of their comfort zone, to write something completely different than what they might really have an easy time doing. And then to have faith on a person who has no discernible credit doing this. And it was really kind of the perfect opportunity to get to do something and see how it doesn't matter at what stage you are in your career, it's still hard and it's still a challenge, and it's just as hard as it is for the people starting out. There was a day when one of the contributors, somebody who is a very successful best-selling author who at the time had a book out, and I had just hand-sold it, went on my break for lunch and got an email saying, I can't do this, I don't know how to write a short story. And when I just sold the 300-page book, you would think it wouldn't be that hard to write 12 pages. But the person was struggling, and so I had to suddenly have the conversations of, like, oh, no, you can do this, and be a cheerleader, and we talk through, a lot of just fundamental writing things to kind of get the idea into shape. So it certainly goes beyond just sometimes, checking spelling or something like that. I mean, those are, the line editing things are very much later in the process. So a lot of it, what I did was, between having conversations developmentally, helping them with the stories, it was a lot of times helping with the specifics of what we asked for, too. So it became a really interesting process to see how everyone really, it doesn't matter at what stage, can really use an editor.
Cool. And then Dave, one of the things that's really interesting is that you've got a really good mix of standalone books, but then also you have a pretty long-winded series. So how did you kind of write that? This is totally off script, so. But how did you keep your thread going in such a long-winded series when you've got I shouldn't say long-winded, it's like seven books. But you've got so many really good standalone books. How did you kind of balance that?
Well, I started out writing my series, Hunters of the Dark, and I feel like I've kind of gotten away from writing like a series. I'm more interested in starting new stories, so that's why I kind of gravitated toward doing these standalones. But I do have, I heard that you were kind of talking about this earlier, how you have your books kind of like little Easter eggs between them. I have the same kind of thing in mind, where a character from this appears in the series. This is a prequel that came out of the series, so they're kind of still interconnected, a lot of them. But yeah, it's just nice to have a fresh slate where you can kind of like do what you want, as opposed to having so much like continuity and history in the books. So yeah, I just kind of naturally gravitated in that direction.
Yeah, and there's a lot of authors that do the same thing, that tie their worlds together. Stephen King is one, does it a lot. Brandon Sanderson is another. Sarah J. Maas. They write different books that are kind of standalones, but they get sucked back into the same universe. So it's fun for the fans. It's a nice little Easter egg every once in a while. Very cool. So what's your writing process like?
I was actually talking to Sarah about this earlier, about how there's pantsers who kind of write, kind of free flow kind of, and then there's people who plot out their stories. And I am definitely a pantser. I have a little bit of an idea of what's going to happen, a little bit of character stuff, but pretty much they kind of do what they want. They kind of take me through the journey a little bit. So yeah, it's kind of, I kind of leave it up to them.
Stephen King says the same thing, that a lot of times he will be writing a character and they'll do something that he did not expect. He's gotten frustrated with some of his characters, but to be true, and it sounds crazy, but I think it's a really cool part of the creative process that they become real people in their minds when they're writing them.
I almost take it like scene by scene. Like after I'm done writing for the day, I'll kind of know where it goes next, and I'll be thinking about it a lot during that day. And when I'm at bed at night, and then the next day when I come to it, I have like kind of an idea of where it's going to go. I can just start writing it.
That's totally true though about characters kind of becoming real in your mind and on the page, because they've got their own personalities, and sometimes you want to steer the plot a certain way, and that character just, it's not in their personality. Like they wouldn't do that. It doesn't make sense. It seems forced to make them go that way, so then you're like, right, I guess we're going this way, and they kind of take you through it. And I am 100% a pantser as well. I have tried to be a plotter, but I write by the seat of my pants. I don't even write chronologically, which is kind of a headache. I don't necessarily recommend it. But this started as just one book, and I wrote pieces throughout the timeline of when the series takes place. And then I went and organized them, and I stitched them together, and this is book 1 of 6, and it just kind of all unfolded all at once. So I was a little ambitious with my first project, and we'll see if it pans out. But yeah, no, I've tried to outline. It just doesn't work out for me, so to each their own, I guess.
Yeah, there's no outline. Yeah, it just goes. But I think it's funny that everybody's saying the same thing, because I've heard a lot of times people are saying different things in author panels. But there was a time in the Beyond experience where I literally had to stop writing the book for a month, and I called one of the people that I call my editor, and I said, I need to know what to do here, because I want to do this, but this needs to happen. And they're like, that needs to happen. And I said, I don't want to do that. And then it happened anyway. But it needed to happen. Sometimes it just needs to happen.
Yeah.
And you don't know until you write to that point, and then there's a right turn that you didn't see coming. But yeah, I think if you're not listening to your characters, then you're not writing well. Yeah.
So I used to do things a little more loosely. I used to have some broad plot points, and I would try to write to them. Or if I was writing an essay or something, or a review, I would kind of have a general, maybe very vague sense, and kind of discover things as I was going. And then a few things changed. I have a 2-year-old, and his schedule dictates my life. I'm home with him a lot, and so his nap schedule and his moods and whether or not he sleeps completely changes the course of everything. So between him and doing this, I've had to become very, very efficient with whatever time I have. I work multiple jobs in addition to freelancing, so I sometimes only have, before I used to have the luxury of having a lot of time to discover things and to go off and do, find paths that can work for me. Now I don't. If I needed to get it done, I've maybe got 30 minutes to work on it a day, and they have to be productive 30 minutes. So sometimes it's me, a lot of times it's me on my lunch break sitting in my car in a park looking like a serial killer, writing on my steering wheel in my notebook.
The Lucky Nar.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's me at work when nobody's looking, keeping my note, kind of whipping out my notebook and writing while I'm shelving and getting a sentence done here or there. It was something I used to do when I worked here in Racine. I worked at a factory, and in between, we'd work on light poles. So in between, doing a few, if nobody was looking, I would always rip up time cards and write notes. So that's always sort of how I've kind of done it, and now I have to do it that way if I need to get anything done. So
it happens, yeah. Yeah, that was interesting, not to go back again to Stephen King, but one of the things that he wrote about, he writes a lot of little snippets about his stories, and Pet Sematary was one that he came up with the idea just by viewing his kid, and then a couple other things, one of his neighbors. But he said that it was the one book that it terrified him. He said he went too far, and it became obviously a huge hit. But he wasn't even going to publish it. He wrote the book and threw it in a drawer and was like, "I'm done. I can't do this." But he was approaching the end of his contract with Doubleday, and they needed one more book, so he's just like, "Fine, read this." And obviously became huge. But you never know necessarily where the creative juices flow and come from. So good stuff. All right, another fun question. What are some of your favorite shows or movies? Get to know the author.
All of them. Game of Thrones was great until this last season.
Oh no.
If anybody liked
no
it,
political contributions, please.
No, I like Breaking Bad's really good too. I really love Boardwalk Empire. That show really did it for me.
Yeah.
Peaky Blinders is cool. The Office.
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
No one else has time to watch television, so
Keep going.
I'm a fan of Westworld.
Oh,
I really
that's a
like The
good one, too.
Americans. I also like the superhero shows. So I'm into Flash and Supergirl.
your hero.
Yeah.
Yeah, movies, Marvel movies, Lord of the Rings. I like Law and Order, SVU a lot. Criminal Minds, kind of the psychological shows like that.
The two show Barry, I really love a lot. It blends humor and crime stuff really well. And the TV show Homicide from way back, that's always been a favorite. And also Better Things. It's a kind of a day in the life comedy. Usually a combination of comedies or dramas.
Very cool. Very cool. Now you have something to do for homework. So tell us a little bit about your most recent book or what you're currently working on, if you'd like to share. No one wants to share.
I'll go first. This is my most recent one. It's the hardest science fiction book I'll probably ever write because it was really important for me to get it accurate when it comes to the scientific components of it. I didn't want anything that was outside of the world of current or near future possibility. There's no light speed travel. There's no aliens. Sorry if anybody was hoping to read on them. But,
that you know of.
Yeah, maybe down the road. But truthfully, this is the only book that I've ever had to write notes, and then I have this big, huge whiteboard because I do plan on taking some leaps forward in the same universe because I know what the end of the story is, and I think it's going to be a pretty dramatic finish. Anyway, it's about an apocalyptic event that involves humanity, and there is hope, but the hope doesn't come from humanity itself. It actually comes from a robot called Omega. So
It was pretty awesome. I mean, there's some really good humor.
Right?
Yeah, it's really good.
We'll talk later, but there's one particular part that I was like, I don't know if I should put this in here, but then I left it in, and a few people were like, no, that was awesome.
Yeah, no, good stuff. Very comparable, in my modest opinion, to like Neil Stephenson style sci-fi fantasy type writing. Similar-ish to James S.A. Corey, who's actually two different guys, but very similar in scope and kind of world building and stuff like that. Fans of probably Deep Impact, Armageddon, you'll really enjoy the book in general. So really good.
I'll talk about yokai. In that book, I got really interested in Japanese monsters after reading this manga called Kitaro. And I just wanted to know more about yokai. So I was reading about the different creatures that kind of fall under the umbrella. And the Japanese monsters are just like really weird and creepy, sometimes really funny. And there is nothing out there like fiction-wise for that. And I really like urban fantasy, and I wanted to fill a void in that genre by having these Japanese monsters incorporated into it. So I came up with this character, Yumiko, who lives in Tokyo, and she is spirited away when she's a young girl, and the yokai lord lets her go, but then he says he'll be back for her on her 18th birthday. So since then, she's kind of prepared herself to battle for life by killing another yokai. And it's kind of leading up to the confrontation between them. There's some surprises along the way. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to write. It was a lot of fun to research. Just there's so much tied into Japanese culture in the monsters and stuff too that it was just it was an easy way to transition that into like writing a book about that about Tokyo.
What I'll say too is that despite the fact that it's very much not what we're used to, it's written in a really good way that introduces you to kind of the different characters in the setting in a way that's very palatable. And what I really liked was the character development. I'm a big one for character development. If I just read a book and it's got flat characters, generally I'm going to be disappointed, even if it was a phenomenal story. And it had great character development. You could really identify with the heroine, so that was a good point. And tell them that also, right when we started working together, you had entered that into a competition as well, right?
Yep, exactly. Library Journal has a Selfie Award that they do every year, and I won for the fantasy category in 2015 for this book. And as I was telling Sarah earlier, I didn't even know about it until I was on Twitter and I just saw that I won it. Nobody contacted me about it, so it's kind of a surprise.
Congratulations!
Yeah, right. They eventually contacted me, but yeah, I got to go to Boston and we had a little party for it, and yeah, it was fun.
I guess I can go next since my genre is kind of similar.
Sure.
So I kind of touched on writing science fantasy before and how it blends the genres. And with mine, I've got kind of a fantasy realm with these creatures that have supernatural abilities, and that's the fantasy part of the book. And then there's still, the normal human realm, like the normal people like us. And to combat these supernatural abilities, they have to develop advanced technology in order to kind of imitate or hold their own against them. So that's where the science fiction kind of comes in when you start bringing the advanced technology into that. So mine starts out with the protagonist. He's a half ghost, half human creature, I guess. But he had been hailed as a hero where he was at, and then his family betrayed him, and he ended up being carted off to a government facility as this war is building up between these two realms. So that was fun too, is when you're within the fantasy and the science fiction genres, is you still want to have parts of the book that are relatable. So it's not all just magic and superpowers and advanced technology. I mean, it's real storylines. So there's a lot about family and love and trust and this surrogate group of teenagers that kind of become his new family. So I think it's really important in those types of genres to touch on things like that that are still very relatable for people. So that was a lot of fun to incorporate.
It sounds a little bit like, because I haven't read yours yet. Sorry, there's only so much time to do that. But it sounds a little bit about, there was a movie that came out early 2000s, animated Final Fantasy Spirits Within. It sounds very similar, but it was a cool techno type thriller, but it was underpinned by real like emotive moments, and it was basically about reconnecting with each other. So sounds really good. Be next. One of the ones that are next. Very good. See, this is why it's difficult to work in a bookstore.
Milwaukee Noir is what I've been working on most of the last few years, and it's a collection of short stories all by authors with a connection to Milwaukee. They've either spent a significant amount of time living there or currently live there. each author chose a specific neighborhood and wrote a story that took place there. And one of the goals was to make sure we were really getting an authentic sense of what it's like to live in this area. So a lot of the themes that were going through the book are a lot of them that would resonate in a lot of the Rust Belt, and especially a lot of southeastern Wisconsin, and especially very Milwaukee centric. We wanted to get a very diverse representation, so we asked people who were from all different backgrounds. They, like I had said earlier, some of them had a background writing more crime fiction. A lot of them were people who wrote in other forms. And one of the things that I really wanted to do with that was to get people who would be trying a different way of approaching writing short fiction. And a lot of times when you get really talented people doing something outside of the norm, you get really exciting, different results. So that was one of the fun parts of getting to work with it. And this is there are 120 books in the series, and it's a globe-wide series. So Milwaukee was one of the most recent ones for this area.
Yeah, good stuff. Very good. Well, brings us to kind of the final question before we throw it out to the audience a little bit. If you could offer one piece of advice to aspiring authors or those that are seeking to kind of start their own career, what may it be? Anybody?
How much time do we have?
I said one.
Yeah, okay. Find a group of people who are willing to give you honest feedback. You don't need yes men. That's kind of what I think works best. You need to have some friends that are willing to tell you something sucks and to rewrite it if it is. Because how's that going to help you if they go, oh yeah, that was great.
Yeah. Yeah, that's generic.
Yeah, you know, so that I think helps the most. And being able to trust the people and what they say. You don't always have to listen because it's your voice, right? But usually they have something good to say.
I think networking is really, really important, whether you publish traditionally or if you self-publish. And every person's publishing journey is all different. So the best way for me in my particular genre is not necessarily the best way for you, but just connecting with as many authors as you can and as many writers as you can, and finding out what have they tried, what worked, what didn't work. I mean, we've all got really good resources that we're building every time we attend an event or meet somebody new. We're just kind of compiling these resources to use. So I'd say definitely reach out, meet as many people as you can, trade information, and you never know who's going to help you down the road.
I would just say that there's no right or wrong answer for how you go about your process. You know, like some people pantsers, some people plotters, some people do first person, third person. It's kind of what you feel like is the right way to write. There's obviously going to be a lot of bad words when you first start writing. You just have to keep at it and find what works for you.
One of the things that I definitely learned while doing this is that one of the best ways, everybody starts out somewhere. You don't necessarily start out being able to get better, you know, as rapidly as you'd hope. It's a lot like exercising, and a lot like exercise, you kind of work on things piece by piece. And sometimes the best way to be effective at doing something is just to focus on how you can improve one thing. Or maybe you write with what time you have available or whatever resources, so you start very slowly and then you just keep building. One of the big differences, I mean, I've been at this, as I'm sure all of you have, for a number of years, well, you know, almost 20 years. The thing that really separates having a book done or really anything is finishing something and then starting another thing. There's so many people that are more talented than me that I've known over the course of the time that I've started writing 20 years ago that, you know, I would love to read more work from them, but they stopped doing it. They got discouraged for any number of very valid reasons. They got busy with other things. It wasn't what they wanted to do at the time they had available. And if it's something you want to do, you'll find the time. If it's something you want to do, you'll figure out how to do it with the time you have and the resources you have. You don't have to get an MFA, you don't have to spend 8 hours a day sitting in a chair by yourself, hammering out words, hoping that they're going to be amazing. They might be, they might not be. You don't have to get a huge book contract. You don't have to get, you can do it yourself. It's really the goals you set for yourself and what you want. You can do it. And it doesn't seem like it, but I mean, we figured out ways to do it, and other people do. And the other thing that we've all mentioned is having in a community. I for sure would not have a book. I wouldn't have any of the stuff that I've managed to do if I didn't actually get out and meet people, which was completely the thing they don't teach you anywhere. Nobody at school, they always kind of give you like, oh, you got to sit there and you have to do it every day. You do, but one of the things that writers, I think, don't always think about is there's a social aspect too. You got to get out there and you have to talk to people. You have to talk to booksellers. You have to talk to readers, especially. Find out, you know, what people like. Find out what other writers are doing, and those are the things that can be your lifeline. They certainly have been for me.
Well, just really glad that you were here. So thank you all so much for the time that you have taken out of your busy days and review schedules to meet with everybody. If you guys want to go ahead and come up, obviously they have their books. They would love to inscribe to their newest favorite readers. And yeah, a couple of them will hang out for a little bit more. Some of them will probably still hang out for a little bit more if you want them to. Otherwise, thank you all.